Coming up next on All About Android, it's me, Jason Howell, my co-hosts Ron Richards and Win Tweedow, and our guest, Gabriel Peal. He is the principal Android engineer at Tonal. He also worked at Google and helped create Android Auto. And then he also created an open source animation library that apparently everybody uses. So we talked to him in detail about that. But there's so much news as well. Android 13 Developer Preview 1 is out already. We dive into that. UI theming is about to be a requirement for Android 12 and forward. The Galaxy S22 Ultra and the Tab S8 Ultra, pretty awesome devices. We ask everybody how they feel about what Samsung's doing over there, about large screen form factors. We've got your email and a whole lot more next on All About Android.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This episode of All About Android is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give it a try and see why over 2 million people have used BetterHelp online therapy. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/Android. Hello and welcome to All About Android. This is episode 565, recorded on Tuesday, February 15th, 2022. Your weekly source for latest news, hardware, and apps for the Android faithful. I'm Jason Howell.
And I'm Ron Richards.
And I'm Win Tweedow.
Nice to see you both. And Ron, it's good to have you back.
It's good to be back after a long 2 weeks break. We were saying before the show started in the pre-show, I got to go back and look at the schedule, but I don't think I took a week off for a very long time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
So it was nice. It looks like the last time I took a show off was July 13th.
You need to take more time off. Not that I'm looking forward to you not being on the show, but don't we all need time off? It's important to take that time to step away.
I feel like that's July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, almost 7 months straight. That's crazy. So
too long. But
hey, but that said, I will say, each Tuesday for the past 2 weeks, I've been like, I'm supposed to be doing something right now. What am I supposed to do? And for some reason, I just started tapping my phone and looking at things. But I'm so excited to be back because we got a great show this week. So I'm excited.
We do. We have a fantastic show. And actually, when you emailed a couple of weeks ago and you said, I have someone who I think would be really awesome on the show. And that someone is here today, welcoming to the show Gabriel Peal, who is the principal Android engineer at Tonal. Welcome to the show, Gabriel.
All right. Yeah, it's so great to be here. Very excited.
Yeah, it's awesome to get you here.
So Tonal is the home gym thing, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a friend who works there, Ryan Vance. I think
that's right,
there?
Ryan.
Yeah. He was there. He's been there for a long time. He does.
He's chief content officer, right? Yeah. He and I worked together back in the day at Revision 3. So it's nice to see. Yeah, nice to see good people working together. So
yes, he has deep roots in the TV film industry.
Yep. Yeah, and he is very tall. So when I talk to him, I don't have to look down very far. It's almost disconcerting. He's almost eye level with me. And anytime I meet someone who's the same height as me or close, it kind of throws me off my game when I get into a conversation with him. That was my experience with Ryan. But he's a cool dude. And so are you. It's great to get you on, Gabriel. Thank you so much for hopping on. We are actually going to dive into kind of your background a little bit and pick your brain, so to speak, because you have some interesting history with Android. Before we do, I just want to mention at the top of the show, we have a survey going on right now for Twit. And so, if you want to help us out, it's an audience survey, twit.tv/survey22. It just takes a couple of minutes. It's a way for you to, tell us what you like about what we're doing, what you don't like, who you are. You don't have to answer all the questions if you don't feel comfortable with it, but the information is safe. It just really helps us to create content that you want to watch and that you want to listen to. So I wanted to mention that at the top of the show this time around, just in case you don't hear it at the end. twit.tv/survey22. Thank you for doing that. We do appreciate it. And right now, why don't we talk a little bit with Gabriel about kind of your background in Android? I mean, obviously right now, you're working for Tonal. And prior to that, you were at Airbnb. You've worked for Google. You've created some things, which I will admit, this non-developer guy right here, some of the things that you've created, like I'm curious to get you to describe and explain what they are, like Lottie and Mavericks, because I'm a little, kind of lost on certain aspects of it. But you've done a lot in the realm of Android. What drew you to Android over kind of, a lot of the other directions that you could have gone, I suppose? What was it about Android?
I could probably throw a little like backhanded high five to Twit over here, actually. Back in, it was probably middle school is when I started to really get into tech, watching Twit on my iPod video. I remember that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, this thing came out. I can watch Twit on it.
Right on.
And the fact that you're doing that in middle school does not make Jason or I or Burke feel very old at all whatsoever. Sorry.
Definitely not.
I remember that little iPod that played video, and I remember when that came out, and I was like, who would ever watch anything on this tiny little screen? But turns out like that was the future. Yeah. That was kind of the future, right? That was But yeah, it worked out for Twit, that's for sure. But okay, cool. So you kind of was that when you discovered a passion for technology, or at that point was Android like what is the time frame? Is Android even out at that point? What's that look like?
No, this was several years before Android was a thing. Flip phones and dumb phones and stuff like that were all the rage back in the day. But I knew I was into technology, and I always I liked coding, kind of became passionate about that in high school. And then it crossed at an intersection with building end user features and products. And I always kind of looked up to the Apples and at that point, the Microsofts and the Googles of the world as the people who are doing all of the big things in that space. Went to school, built up some computer science background. And then right after school, I got an offer from Google. The way things worked back then is you kind of get a generic offer, and then you get to do this team matching thing where they try to figure out what team is the best fit for you. And I was just like, Android. I only want to work on Android, nothing else. So awesome. The recruiter came back to me, and she was like, okay, so we have a couple options on Android. There's this one option. At that point, it was just called Android Automotive. And I can't tell you anything about it. The hiring manager is going to have to tell you a little bit more. And at that point, I had already signed an NDA and everything, and started to hear the first ideas of what ended up ultimately becoming Android Auto. I'm also personally a car guy. The year before, my last internship in college was General Motors, and so I was like, This is incredible. It's Android, it's cars, it's at Google, and it was like right out of school. I was like, this is the most amazing opportunity I could have possibly crafted. So that's how I got into Android. I had actually never really written Android before joining that team, but I had about 9 months between getting accepted onto it and joining, where I was like, all right, well, this is probably going to have to change. So I really put my head down and tried learning Android as quickly as possible by starting by like re-implementing a lot of things. At that point, there was a social network called Path, which had this really beautiful animations. Mm-hmm. They really were like pioneers in a lot of really beautiful UI elements. And I was like, I want to see if I can make it.
I was on Path too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They had this hamburger menu thing. It was a plus, and when you tapped it, it would like fan out.
It would fan out. That's right. I remember that. Yeah. Yes.
That was basically the first thing that to re-implement that was one of the first things I did on Android, and I'll never forget like getting the timing curves exactly right and whatnot, and then reusing some of those skills to actually build Android Auto a year later.
That's awesome. So I'm kind of still floored about the fact that like right out of school, Google comes to you and says, "Hey, we want to hire you," or I don't know how that worked, but I mean, you obviously had something that Google could attach themselves to that they were willing to hire you based on the skills that you had at that point, and B, move you into a department with Android. Did Google not know that you hadn't really had much coding experience with Android, or is this just how Google works behind the scenes? Is that just what they do?
Yeah, I don't know. They knew. Like the hiring manager definitely knew. I think
that's so cool, though.
There was something. I mean, I was just like I was super passionate about this, and I made it really clear that this was a specific interest of mine, and that working on the intersection of Android and cars was something that was really going to resonate with me. And so, and as a hiring manager and a part engineering manager now, it's looking for that someone who's really passionate and cares about the product is something, frankly, I'm actually looking for my team for right now.
Oh, well, there you go. Cool. Folks, pay attention if you're looking for a job. Maybe later we can give people some sort of recourse as far as if they want to apply for that. Based on where we see Android Auto now versus what it was in the incarnation when you were first working on it, like what is your impression of how that has developed over time? Do you like where it's landed? I mean, obviously it's miles different now than it was in the first couple of years of its iteration, but what have been your thoughts as you've seen it kind of develop over the years?
I think it's probably exceeded my wildest dreams. I remember early on when I joined, it was basically whiteboard ideas. It didn't have a name. We had no OEM automaker partners, zero signed up at that point. There was no UI. I have great photos of what it looked like early on. And it was just kind of an idea. And we didn't even know if it'd work at all, frankly. In fact, even the base architecture was really pushing the boundaries of what Android was capable of back then and even still today. We were like, hey, how do we get Android onto a screen in a car? And the way we ended up doing it, which is the way it's still done today, is you take Android and you write an app kind of like you normally would, but then instead of rendering it to the primary display, you render it to the surface in the background, and then in real time encode the app that gets rendered into an H.264 video stream. Then it sends the video stream over to the car. The car then decodes the video stream. And then when you want to interact with it, you touch the screen, and it then takes those pointer events, sends the raw pointer events back to Android. Android then injects it into the window to impact the user interface and re-render the effects of that and send it back to the car. It's crazy. Kind of a wild architecture that it works at all, and with relatively low latency. Especially
that's my question. Yeah, absolutely. The latency aspect. I mean, every one of those steps introduces the risk of longer delays in between, and that stuff's totally detectable. Especially when you're driving somewhere and you just need this one function to happen the second you tap it with your finger. That's interesting.
Yeah. I love that though, because I feel like as an Android dev, I think for a long time I've just seen it as, okay, you write a thing and it goes on a phone, and you write another thing and it goes on a phone. And sometimes you might connect to, I don't know, some other hardware, whether it's like some kind of like camera peripheral or just something else. Sometimes it's on the phone, but it talks to something else. And what I think is so cool about your experience, Gabriel, is that you're actually writing, like, for example, like Android Auto and like now Tonal. You're not writing an app to put on a phone. You're writing a thing that's not a phone that holds Android. And I think that's just a very special and very unique kind of experience. And I just kind of wonder, like, how much of your experience with Android Auto and kind of building Android on a non-phone form factor is informing or kind of like inspiring you, or I guess like what lessons have you learned kind of working in kind of like non-conventional form factors? And how are you taking that to Tonal? Or is it just like a whole new ballgame? Is it something totally different?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So like working at these two non-phone form factors in the Android space, each one kind of brought a unique set of challenges. So in the Android Auto side of things, we were really limited in terms of using standard Android components. And for those of you who are familiar, activities and fragments and things like that are really designed to render to the primary display. And so we had to build a custom framework that resembled those that could be rendered to background surface. So there were a lot of unique challenges in terms of just building the core application architecture. But the beautiful part of that system is that because the car effectively becomes an external monitor, we can just update all of our apps through the Play Store. And so we can deploy our apps through the Play Store, and any integrations, Spotify, Google Maps, Waze, whatever, are all just embedded into their normal apps. And so from that perspective, it's very standard. On the tonal side, it's kind of the other way around. We have a very standard app from the perspective of building a product. We can use anything that you would normally use in the Android world, but we don't have Play services and we don't have the Play Store. So we have to do things like handle our updating by hand, and because we don't have the Play Store to deliver those updates. So each one brought a unique set of challenges, but from the most part, it's kind of the beauty of Android is that because it's such a flexible operating system, most of the time it looks the same no matter where it's running.
Yeah, and I think that's like one of the promises of Android, right? I'm sorry, Ron.
No, keep going.
Yeah. No, just that, I always think about Android as phones because that's been my life for the last 10 years. But I mean, the promise of AOSP and Android was Android could be anywhere. And I have to admit, I think the last time I saw you in person was like in New York at a conference, and I was like, "Oh, what are you doing now?" And you're just like, "Oh, I work at Tonal." And I have to admit, like, part of me blanked out, was like, do they have like a companion Android app? Like, I couldn't, like, it didn't process it first, but like that was like when I realized, oh, Tonal is the app, and I think that's just really cool and a really cool example of what Android really can be, and not just, like the device we normally talk about. So
sort of pick up on that. I feel, and I would love, Gabriel, I'd love to hear what your take on it is, at least in recently, because we've seen, both with Android 12L, which is, expanding, it's, the dot release of the latest operating system, which, for different size devices, like presumably foldables, but the idea of like other than phone form factors. But also I feel like going back to last year's I/O, we heard a lot of chatter about Google now working to make Android work on different screens, or we've seen a lot with Android TV and stuff like that. So how does that dovetail into the work that you're doing with Tonal, given the form factor of the device that you're working with? I mean, how close are you staying in touch with Google in terms of what they're doing on the base level of the operating system to support the things that you're making Android work on your device, despite them not doing that yet? Do you see it's kind of like a snake eating its own tail kind of situation, right?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. And when you look at the world of like Android 12L and these foldables, bigger screens, some new tablets that have come out recently or coming out recently, there's a lot of emphasis on making it a more of a general computing operating system. So there's a lot of effort into things like multi-window, app switching, compatibility with keyboards and external monitors and things like that turn it into a more general computing device. Again, on the Tonal side, we're a little bit on the opposite end of the spectrum. We're much more like a kiosk. And in fact, I have to admit, we just did some work in the AOSP world to make Tonal behave like a kiosk. And it's amazing how much Tonal doesn't want to behave like a kiosk. The amount of work we had to do to make sure that our app comes up before the system UI is something that AOSP does not support. And I could spend an hour tracing you through the code path as to why it is very stubborn and doesn't want to change the way that it initializes. But it was definitely not designed to be a kiosk, even though it's used for all kinds of things like airplane seats,
totally,
in-flight entertainment and banks, and they're all using Android. And frankly, I think if someone from Google is listening, all these companies are pulling their hair out to try to get it to actually behave like a kiosk rather than this beautiful, rich, multi-window, multi-app experience.
So then to that extent, do you ever feel like Google is focusing on the wrong category? I mean, obviously when it comes to Android, the wide majority of people, when they think Android, they think smartphone, right? But the reality is smartphone, as successful and as major as that is for Android and Google at large, there are so many other applications and ways that Android is being used for these other things. We see Google, like you said, Ron, right now Google is working on Android 12L, and that's really aimed at, we noticed that we haven't put a lot of attention into larger screen devices. And I assume that means, larger screen mobile devices, foldables, tablets, that sort of thing. But Google, in your estimation, have they not spent enough time looking at the other addressable markets and saying, well, holy cow, we've got an insane amount of kiosks out there, and it might not be sexy to do an emphasis on this in an upcoming version of Android, but it might be essential, because if everybody's recreating the wheel, that doesn't make sense. But I mean, maybe they just do it out of necessity. What are your thoughts there?
I'd love to agree with you, but I'm going to have to put my cynicist hat on for a second.
All right.
When a Tonal or a United ships a Google or Android kiosk-like platform, especially one without Play services, which is the case for most of these devices, these kiosk-like devices, Google doesn't make any money. And if there's no money to be made, there's no reason for them to make that investment. I can't say for certain whether that's an explicit, implicit, or just the wrong analysis of why it is the way that it is, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's at least implicitly in there somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a heck of a lot of sense, right? If at the end of the day it isn't increasing their bottom line, like why spend the time and attention on that when they could do something that is going to bring, more money into the company? Ultimately, that's the point of being a corporation, right? Is to make that money. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then on the flip, to like kind of build on that too, like no one is really screaming down their neck for it. It's from a company's perspective, you kind of do it one time and then you're done. Mm-hmm. And that's true. And you don't really have any other options. Like, what are we going to do? We're not going to use Tizen. We're not going to use Windows. We're not going to use Linux. Android is really the only chance. So you kind of suck it up and deal with it. And we've gotten it to work for our needs. And we don't have to think about it anymore. But
why wouldn't you use Tizen? I mean, come on, it's Tizen.
No, but seriously, why wouldn't you use Tizen? No. That's all fascinating. One thing I want to hear you, because I told you these interviews go quick. Like we're almost out of time for this particular portion of the show. But tell me a little bit about Lottie. You created Lottie, and I'm even looking at the URL. It's airbnb.io/Lottie. And yet this is something that from my, poking around, it seems like a lot of companies are using this. What exactly is Lottie? What is the association with this and Airbnb? Explain a little bit about this.
Yeah. Lottie is an open source library that I started working on while at Airbnb and continue to be the primary maintainer of for Android, I should say. And effectively, if you think about shipping an image, we have JPEGs. And if you are an engineer or building a website or something like that, and you want to ship an image, you can drop in a JPEG or a PNG in these established formats and it'll just go. It'll display pretty much anywhere. But there's never really been something like that for animations. There have been things like GIFs or MP4 movie files, but they have all kinds of problems. They're really big. You can't scale them up. They're not vectors, so they get pixelated. It doesn't support things like transparency or dynamic theming or all that kind of stuff. So Lottie allows you to motion designers to create vector animations, export them as a file to just a JSON file, and then there are players on Android and web and iOS and basically every other platform, so you can just drop in the file and play it. Plus, there's lots of additional little features to do things, as I mentioned, like theming, dynamically setting the progress, and all kinds of stuff to make it more interactive and rich. If you've used a lot of Google apps are using it now. Many apps are using it, but Google has really adopted it in a big way. So if you've set up a Google Home device or a Chromecast device, you might remember these bouncing circles and boxes and like those, like the Wi-Fi thing that kind of like, it's like a windshield wiper that goes back and forth. Yep. That and any other time you see something like that, it's almost always Lottie.
No way. Well, that's something to be proud of because you see a lot of that. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's really cool. Yeah. And so an open source library that, I mean, you also have to feel proud about the fact that, I mean, to that point, like so many major companies using this, that's pretty awesome. But what was the foundation of this? What prompted you to create this?
Oh man, yeah, it's funny how these things start. It's the original plugin for After Effects, which is the designer tool, and the web player was called Body Movin'. The name came from the HTML body tag, and it was like you're making it move. And it was made by, both sides were made by an engineer, Hernan Teresi, an Argentinian engineer who just made it for fun. In like 2014, 15, he started working on it. And then fast forward to 2016, one of the iOS engineers at Airbnb, Brandon Withrow, decided to see if they discovered this thing. It was barely used at all at that point, and started to build a little prototype on iOS. And then after a couple months of that, I saw a little demo and immediately it was obvious to me. it happened to be a light bulb animation, which was not ironic because it was.
Because you had a light bulb
oh my God, this thing's amazing, right? If it exists on web and iOS, like no one's going to use it if it's like awkwardly two platforms. So if I can get this working on Android, this is going to be this huge unlock. There's nothing like it that exists. So, but I had no background in graphics, and I was utterly convinced that I would run into all kinds of problems and limitations in Android APIs that would make it not possible. And so I just started building it. We built a square, and then we made it move, and then we made a circle, we made it move, and then we kept building feature after feature after feature to the point where you could start to build actual complex animations, and they would kind of just work. And then it became obvious that it was so cool. We had to open source it, but it's one of those moments where it's like you're gonna throw a party and you don't know if anyone's gonna show up.
Yeah,
and so
that's super inspiring.
Right, 1.0, and we were like, all right, well, we have this thing. There's nothing like it out there in the mobile world, so let's just throw it out there and see what happens. And on the first day, it made front page of Hacker News. It got hundreds or thousands of GitHub stars right away. Today, the Android library has 32,000 GitHub stars or something like that, as do the other platforms on their own. And it's really become like the ubiquitous. When anytime anyone wants to do motion in web or mobile, it's Lottie. There's pretty much nothing out there to this day.
Yeah, I've used Lottie a few times. We don't have anything like actively in Trello right now that uses Lottie, but whenever I do use it for like hackathon weeks type things, it's always a crowd pleaser. And I think part of what's really awesome about it is that, well, number one, it's kind of based on After Effects. And kind of like, I think before when we would do like kind of animations in Android and try to do kind of a similar like experience on iOS, it's always felt like kind of like two different paths. And, there's always kind of like each individual platform has its kind of like difficulties and limitations. But it's kind of cool, this idea that, for example, I could take a designer at like my work who's really excited and actually has experience with After Effects and work with them, and they can build, kind of a delightful experience, but with parity across, and then that works on both iOS and Android, which is pretty cool. And like, there's a lot of we could probably go into a lot of technical details, but there's a lot of really great things about the way that Lottie works as well. There's a lot of like dynamic things you can do with it, which I really like, and I'm trying to like get going. But I just think it's really awesome. I think also that the fact that it's open source is like a big credit to like Gabriel and the other contributors, and just also I think is just a good. Like so I really wanted to get Gabriel on here because I don't think he's just an amazing engineer, but also a really big fan of Android, the space. And I think something that the Android community is really proud of is kind of like our long history of open source. People do something cool, they solve hard problems, and then they put their code out there for other people to do the same, so that other people can kind of get past these problems and do amazing things. And so I think Gabriel is a really good example of that with Lottie and some of his other open source projects. But yeah, it's amazing. It's a really cool crowd pleaser. And I know I've mentioned like previously, like other times about how much being able to do one thing for two platforms once is really important. And a lot of times we talk about that with like architecture, business logic, but Lottie is that, but for animations. And like Gabriel, I thought it was really cool that you were talking about path and like getting really excited about the animation on there. And it kind of feels like that's kind of like a common thread, like that kind of enjoyment and that kind of enthusiasm and wanting to kind of solve these kind of problems is kind of like a common thread throughout your career, from like, re-implementing path to, being a contributor or being the maintainer of Lottie. So anyway.
Yeah, pretty rad. Right.
Sorry, I'm just bragging on Gabriel.
That's cool. I think it's totally deserved. I think what comes to mind for me is that it's really inspiring to hear that kind of the story of how that was created, because that's just another example of, someone recognizes that there's a need for something that doesn't exist, takes the chance that, to spend the time to do it out of sheer passion and enjoyment and everything. And who the heck knows what's going to happen. And it turns out it ends up changing a lot of people's lives. A lot of developers, rely on that tool as a result of the work you did. So you've got a lot to be proud of. I mean, that's a pretty awesome opportunity. So.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun to work on. It's such a visual project too. It's like I'll sit down and be like, all right, this animation doesn't work. And then I'll sit down. Actually, my favorite place to work is airplanes. I'm the person on my laptop on an airplane because I get like no Wi-Fi, certain amount of time, and Lottie is
focus,
just like the perfect thing to work on a plane. I was in Hawaii last week, and I did not work while I was there, but I definitely worked on Lottie the entire flight there and back. And I don't know, I've just made it my personal time to work on it, and probably half of Lottie has been written on airplanes over the years.
Ha! That's awesome.
Nice.
Well, you have a whole lot of other accomplishments in your history with Android. We don't have the time to run through all of them, but needless to say, it's awesome to get you on and to hear you talk about a little bit of your path. So thank you for that. But you're not going anywhere. We've got the rest of the show. We got a lot of news. This was a hard week for me to curate news for, because there were so many directions it could go in. So we're going to talk about news with Gabriel here in a moment. But first, let's take a break and thank the sponsor of this episode of All About Android. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is basically like it's like taking your brain in for a tune-up. That's really what it's all about. Things like relationships take work. Life takes work, right? A lot of us are going to drop anything to go help someone that we care about. We recognize someone is in need. We will do anything and everything that we can to help them. We'll go out of our way to treat other people well. But how often do we give ourselves the same treatment? It's so easy to give all that treatment and that special attention to other people and then not recognize that we need that attention too. We need to give that. That's a gift that we can give ourselves. Well, this month, BetterHelp Online Therapy wants to remind you to take care of your most important relationship, the one you have with yourself. So, maybe it's hitting the gym or making time for your haircut or even trying therapy. Overall, ultimately, in all of those examples, you're your greatest asset. So invest the time and effort that you have into yourself like you do for other people, and you reap the benefits. That's what BetterHelp is all about. It's just, I experienced BetterHelp. I signed up, worked with a therapist, and it was awesome. Anytime you have the opportunity to sit down with someone and speak words about the things that are locked away inside, it's like you get a release from that. It's like the anvil that you're carrying on your back suddenly gets a lot lighter. So that's what BetterHelp is really all about. It's online therapy. BetterHelp offers video, phone, even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera. If you really don't want to, you don't have to do that. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy. In-person therapy can be pretty darn expensive, I can attest. And you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. So give it a try, and you can see why over 2 million people have used BetterHelp online therapy. It really is cool. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and All About Android listeners actually get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/Android. And I'll spell that out. That's BETTERHELP. betterhelp.com/Android. And you'll get 10% off your first month by going to that URL, betterhelp.com/Android. And we thank BetterHelp for their support of All About Android. Take care of yourself. You owe it to yourself. All right. And with that, it is time for some news.
My favorite numbers in the Android news this week, 13.
Oh, yeah?
That's
13.
My favorite number too, Burke.
Whoa.
My favorite number. Wow.
When I was a kid, 13 was my T-ball number.
It was my Little League number and my soccer number.
There we go.
Yeah, how about that? It was also Lee Mazzilli in the 1986 Mets was number 13.
Okay, I had no idea. I don't even know who that is. Anyway.
All this talk about 13 means that, guess what? Android 12 is tired. It's old. It's over.
Boy. Oh, no.
Viva Android 13. What is it? February 15th. Here we are. We got a month and a half into the new year where we're starting to talk about the next version of Android. But here it is. Android 13 Developer Preview 1 is here.
Okay.
All right? So here's some of the features that we know about, all right? And everybody take notes because I want to hear what your favorite aspects of this are or whatnot, from you developer folks. I want to hear what you think. But anyway, so the features that we know about, icon theming, which will likely be for Pixel devices at launch, and it's based on a developer's monochrome icon if they create one. So more of that Material U.S. kind of theming kind of stuff that can happen on the icons now. A wider selection of palettes for Material U theming. Clock style theming for lock screen. There's always a lock screen thing. Support for Bluetooth LE audio and LC3. Tap to transfer media controls from one device to another. A redesigned audio output selector, which I think is due. NFC, which powers contactless payments, will work across user profiles on the device. It currently only works on the primary user profile. So now if you have multiple users, they can work with those individual accounts. An integrated photo picker mechanism. And also included 2 apps that allow Pixel devices to connect to other devices in a streamlined way. And this is the thing that I saw blown up on the internet. So basically, Chrome OS, Windows 11, Linux, connecting to Android, allowing control in that way. It's kind of amazing. The device will set up a secondary display that is streamed to the other device, leaving your home screen intact.
That sounds familiar.
Features include phone mirroring, notification mirroring, and Chrome OS will have a phone hub section with expanded details from the device. So blurring the lines between Android and other OSs and other devices, very, similar to other things we've seen in the market. But what do we think of Android 13? Have we had a chance to install it, play with it, look at it? What is everybody's takeaway here?
I installed it. And I installed it. My phone didn't break. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a bit limited because it's like the first preview. And I guess this is what happens when I have a real camera. It doesn't autofocus. Hold on. Give me a second. But I mean, everything ran. Usually what we I know what we do is someone on our team will get the developer preview and see if Trello breaks, which it did not, which is good news. Good news, everybody on my team. Yep. But you can kind of see, there we go. You can kind of see the theme, the kind of monochrome themed icons, but of course, other apps, you have to actually implement or use Material U system colors for this to work. And I'll get myself back in focus again. It definitely has, it continues that Android 12 feel. There's a couple of things that aren't in this, and one of the big ones, at least for me as a developer, is going to be the photo picker as an app that kind of is built around user content and displaying and organizing user content. There's the photo picker, for example, is really interesting. I think something that as a developer I'm pretty interested in is app specific language preferences or per app language preferences.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember hearing about that a month or two ago as a possibility in a future version.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool. Our app, for example, localizes on for 23 different languages, has 23 different locales that we do translations for. And it's kind of interesting because, for example, for Trello, we actually have on our main website, you can actually change the language of Trello within the website itself. But there's a little disconnect there because obviously currently the way it is for our app, we do have translations, but you have to kind of change your entire system language or idiom to match. So it's kind of interesting giving folks that are kind of very, locale dynamic, better options and better ways of changing, what language they're seeing things in, especially for us, I think, especially being so user content heavy. And for folks that do need that kind of multilingual experience, I like the idea of that very much. And I just think it's kind of a good possibility to allow people kind of move freely between different apps and their own spheres of content. So that's what I'm excited for.
Now, Gabriel, one thing that stood out to me when Ron was kind of listing some of these features, this streaming from a Pixel device to Chrome OS to Windows 11, Linux, that really sounded like exactly what you were talking about. Do you think it's kind of a similar system, just applied differently?
I wouldn't be surprised if it resembled it pretty closely. I'm obviously many, many years removed from Android Auto at this point. So I don't know if it's the same, but it definitely sounds very similar.
Yeah, it really does. It does.
I would hope that maybe they could do it more efficiently than doing H.264 encode and decode on each side. So,
right.
Maybe we'll see. It was probably the right call for cars and compatibility, but I don't know. They may have some HDMI type of protocol or something.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I just can't believe that we're talking about Android 13. You know what? This happens every year. Last year at this time, suddenly 12 came out, and we're like, wait a minute, 11 just came out, and now we're talking about 12. But this is the reality of the open developer preview model, right? There will always be another thing in the works. It's not like Google takes a break.
Although I wouldn't mind it if we got a little bit of a break, but yes. train never stops moving. And if you think about the lineup, like we're going to get these, they're going to get these developer betas out, get feedback on them, kick the tires, see how they go. We're going to get to May, June for IO, and then we'll get some more information and all that sort of stuff. And then before you know it, Jason, it's going to be the fall and we're going to be talking about the rollout. Like, it's just like, this is the cycle now. This is the yearly treadmill that we're on. So
from the engineering perspective, it's super helpful, right? There's two main things that Google gets out of this. One, they get people to test all of the new APIs that are available to developers early, and so they have time to actually see what the use cases are, collect feedback, and make changes before they openly admit that they're willing to break these early APIs in the first few developer previews, and then on their timeline they'll tell you that they are API stable at a certain point. So again, it's really hard when you're sitting inside of Google and you're like, okay, I'm building a new photo picker API, which I'm very excited about, by the way. What are all the use cases, right? You can't go to every company in the world and figure out how people are going to use this. You kind of have to throw it out there. Take a first stab at it, and then people will let you know if it doesn't do what
yes, indeed.
They certainly will.
So then you get a chance to do that, and they get to fix it. And frankly, I would be like afraid to make any changes out of almost like paralysis if I knew I had to get it right the first time from their perspective. And this gives them a chance to iterate. And so especially going way back, there were some Android APIs that probably should never have existed. And they didn't really have this before. It was a grand unveiling, and they got them right sometimes and they didn't get it right other times. And giving them this window is going to be really helpful for the long-term maturity and stability of the platform.
Yeah. So that's a great way to kind of summarize the strength of the current model. I like how you put that. One thing that we didn't mention because I didn't see it, but Scooter X in chat just pointed out, some developer out there has taken Android 13 Developer Preview 1, and I guess there's a improved virtualization system in Android 13 that has allowed this developer to get Windows 11 ARM running on the Pixel 6. So apparently your Pixel can soon run Windows and virtualized. So that's interesting.
If you wanted to, why would you?
If you want,
yeah.
I don't know. Hey, people have reasons, I suppose.
I will say.
Do you think you could then stream that back to a Chromebook?
Yeah, right. Maybe so. Suddenly your Chromebook is running Windows 11. Yeah, Windows 10.
I will say I recently onboarded a new employee at work on my day job, and usually when we hire somebody, it's like, all right, well, what computer do you want or whatever, and the request was for a Dell running Windows, and I was just like, okay, no, really, what do you want?
You just can't accept it. So some people out there, to each their own. Absolutely, absolutely. Material U is, that was obviously marquee feature of Android 12 anyways, it's the dynamic theming of the system. Really, since launch, it's been kind of targeted at Pixel devices initially, even as devices have started to roll out Android 12. I don't think initially they had any sort of Material U hooks baked in to any degree, but Samsung, Xiaomi, they've recently started unveiling their takes on what Material U will be. And now Google is announcing that the feature is coming to just a wider swath of devices. Essentially, Google's just saying, hey, be on the lookout. Samsung, OnePlus, Oppo, Vivo, Realme, Xiaomi, Techno. Oh, I haven't heard of Techno before. I mean, I've heard of Techno, but not that kind of Techno. And more. So coming soon, apparently, a lot of different devices are going to be adhering to this. And there's kind of a reason for that, it seems. Android Police reported that Material U theming will soon, and that is as of March 14th, become a requirement for phones that are running Android 12. So apparently, manufacturers of these devices, they're going to have to put this material theming or something like it, at least tapping into the theming engine in their own special way into this going forward. Which I suppose, why does it kind of, I don't know. I feel like the reception of Material U has been very mixed. I actually really enjoy it. But is this Google just saying, hey, we put a lot of work into this thing. We want everyone to be using it, so we're going to require it. Does Google do this a lot with features that are, like this? I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you guys have any take on this? What do you think?
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, not surprised at all. And especially the way that material use style theming is done, it's all kind of based on these like very, basically a standard of, I think they call them tokens, basically names for colors and like the roles that colors play. And I think part of like the challenge of being a dev is to try to make your app look consistent across all the possible Android devices. Yeah. And this could just be another vector where it doesn't work. I know like just in general, before we even had this, I've tried to do some crazy things with customizing notifications and other kind of like Chrome type stuff. There's a really, I don't want to smack talk Samsung every single chance I get. But like, for example, like there's a really famous bug.
It's okay. Embrace it. It's fine.
No. So, and for example, like, so these inconsistencies are a problem. There actually was a very funny in retrospect, issue where, for example, Android provides the color white. Normally for most folks in kind of like this realm, it's going to be the hex code FFFFFF. On Samsung, that was not the color that it was set to. So, I mean, it seems like a really small thing, but these kind of inconsistencies kind of give you a headache, cause your QA engineers to like ask you why this doesn't fit when you are like, no, that's definitely white. I mean, what else would white be but be white? So I think a lot of this is just kind of taking this kind of like very, new, but also kind of like standardized like color system and making sure everyone plays nicely with it. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Gabriel?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting because the Pixel, when they announced Material You with the Pixel, they really made it all about your wallpaper. And the whole phone was going to react to your wallpaper, which admittedly to me, it never makes a ton of sense. I'm not one to really care about the wallpaper of my phone. And I'm sure there are people out there, but I never look at it. It's there for half a second. And when you're viewing an app or the notification shade, you're almost explicitly not looking at your wallpaper. So to tie those things together never made a ton of sense to me. But from what it seems like from this article, the requirements for OEMs will not extend necessarily to the wallpaper. And so it almost feels like more they're just requiring OEMs to allow theming of the system UI is how I'm reading into that. Does that seem like an accurate take to you?
That's an interesting distinction, and I missed that. But that makes a lot of sense, right? Like the system has a theming engine built in, allow users to tap into that and do it as you wish. If you want to tie that into the wallpaper, great, but you don't have to. That makes more sense. That makes more sense. I think that maybe that was part of kind of the disconnect. It seemed to me that like a feature where the wallpaper could transform the look of the entire device seems like a special feature, not a required feature. You know what I mean? And so requiring people to do that, I was like, well, that's kind of a, that's a ways to go as far as saying you have to do this. That makes more sense to me, what you described there, Gabriel. So who knows if that's exactly, their rationale or whatever, but
there's also the business rationale that they've invested in this whole thing and that it's a key selling point for their line of phones, and that like the whole marketing campaign was around it. And so in order for it to work, they need people to get on board. Right. And so, it's the balance between all the developer side of things, but also with the business side of things, where it's like they need to deliver on this promise that they're telling customers, whether or not that's something people are using. Like, I don't know if anybody's purchasing a Pixel 6 going, I really like Material You, I want that, but the idea that of what it brings, and like the phone seems smarter because it's changing and that sort of thing, changing based on your color scheme and things like that, gives it a little bit of edge, but it's got to have that adoption. So,
Yeah, and that brand recognition, I like in many parts of the world, Android is not what people think of when they think of these phones. It's a Samsung, and I imagine in China that's probably even more the case as they're further from Google and Play Store and Play services. So I do imagine that there's some desire within Google to hold a stronger association with Google and the Android brand.
Yeah, interesting. I think you're right. Cool. And then we have Play services, which we don't really talk about very much on this show lately. It's not like we know what's going on, but apparently we do.
Well, actually, now we are going to get to know more about what's going on more often. As Android Police reported last month, Google Play services, every time they have an update, are going to be a little bit more kind of open and transparent about it. If you are a little bit less familiar with what Google Play services are, it's basically a background app that is kind of like the hub for all of your, very popular proprietary Google services like location, geofencing, Google Fit. It all kind of is accessed through Google Play services. So it's a pretty important part of a lot of app developers' lives. And in February, in this month, we've got a couple of updates to some of the Google Play services. MMS backup is now supported. Basically, before you could do MMS backup where the media was backed up as well, but you had to be on Google One. And if you did have like kind of a free MMS backup, you just get the text. But now, I believe with the Google Play services, you're going to get the full media backup. And also some Google Pay improvements, some UI improvements, and also looks like you have the ability, hold on, let me pull up my notes. Google Play, so there's going to be some UI improvements to Google Play, being able to see the balance right on your card art. And what's actually, I think, is kind of fascinating is that now from basically banking apps, you can actually add cards directly from, it looks like, third-party banking apps and online payment apps. So yeah, just a couple like kind of improvements. And it's always kind of good to know what's going on with Google Play services. They're kind of a undeniable part of Android app development, for better or for worse. Always kind of feel funny about proprietary things, but it's important. So it's it'll be interesting to see, like how updates like this kind of propagate out to like apps and their features.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Also, COVID-19 vaccine cards viewable in Pay,
wow.
which I kind of thought that was already the case, but then I did the whole saving, a vaccine card to my phone thing, and I couldn't find it in Google Pay. So apparently it wasn't, and now that's going to be added included as well. So
it had been state by state, and here in California, I've been doing that for months.
Yeah, and you mean your vaccine card stored inside of Google Pay? And like you open up Google Pay and there it is? Oh, okay. Then I must be looking in the wrong place. I'm in California as well, so I just must be looking in the wrong place. But yeah, there you go. Cool. Well, we've got lots more news to come up. Next, we're going to talk about kind of the biggest hardware news of the week. That's up next.
Yeah.
Possibly some of the biggest news, or at least the news that caught the most attention in the past week, would be the Samsung Unpacked event last Wednesday. It happened the day after the show. Sometimes it works out that way. So you're getting news that's almost a week old. But it doesn't matter because these phones aren't even out yet. So it's not like it's old news for the Samsung Galaxy S22, the S22 Plus and Ultra. And yes, I mean, we've been talking about these devices on the show for a little while now, but so there isn't a whole lot that we didn't already know. So I'm not going to go into the typical kind of like specs list, the endless specs list, other than to just acknowledge that the S22 Ultra really is just a Galaxy Note, right? The Note series is not happening anymore. Instead, it kind of seems like going forward, the S series Ultra is going to be the one that has the S Pen, inserted into the device. Spoke with Florence Ion on last week's Tech News Weekly. She actually had the S22 Ultra in her hand. And I mean, she was like, you wouldn't know. Like there's no obvious difference between what this is and what the Note was. They're basically the same device. It's just now it's an Ultra. Now it's an S22 Ultra. So, and then Gabriel, before the show, you were talking about being excited about potentially upgrading. You have a Samsung. You were saying, was it the S20?
The S20.
Is that right?
Right. The S20.
So which device of these? So you're staying in the Samsung family, it sounds like. Which device are you more leaning towards?
Yeah. Also, as an Android engineer, given problems like Win talked about around the changing the white colors and whatnot, I have some hesitancy around you being a Samsung user myself, but I am. There are a handful of reasons why I think I personally prefer those phones over some of the recent phones. I'm also a small phone person, so I've always gone with the smallest version of the phones, and typically Samsung has the best high-end, smaller smartphones, especially compared to this year's Pixel 6s, which for my personal preference, are just way too big. So I would definitely go with the S22 regular. I'm excited about that phone. It's slightly smaller. I really like the new, slightly boxier design. I think it looks really nice. I'm a bit worried about the battery life and thermal throttling performance on it. So definitely want to wait for the reviews before jumping on it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, speaking of thermals inside of the device, they also kind of announced that these devices have some sort of a kind of a venting system. And I don't think that was isolated to just the Ultra. I thought that was all of them, but maybe that was just isolated to the Ultra. But are you ever, because this topic comes up from time to time, the smaller device of the three, the way Samsung creates their devices anyways, S22, S22 Plus, S22 Ultra, essentially the 22 and the 22 Plus are similar internals. It's just one slightly larger. There might be some small differences and everything. Do you ever find yourself being a smaller phone fan, disappointed at the spec situation on those smaller devices when compared to the larger devices?
Yeah, all the time. The small phones are almost always missing things. In this case with Samsung, they're probably one of the closest in terms of feature parity. The S Pen, personally, not a big. I would never use it. I had a Note 10 for a while, never used it. It has the 30x telephoto that goes up to 100, which it looks incredible, but I probably would never use it. So it's not too bad with the Galaxy S line, but oh man, there are so many phones that just look amazing that are just so big that personally I would never consider. And I know I see the sales numbers for these things. You can see it on the iPhone side as well. Their normal iPhone is a reasonably sized phone, but the Mini barely sells relative to the others. So I think I'm surprisingly, I always feel surprised by it. I'm definitely in the minority in liking smaller phones, but to me, it feels like an underserved market.
Yeah.
So I actually have a question. I know, so you're saying that you like smaller phones, and I kind of want to hop a little bit because so this is gonna be a little bit tangent, but I know that Gabriel has a Fold because the moment I knew that I had to get Gabriel on the show was we were kind of like talking about our Folds, and I was kind of being me and like saying I like the hardware. I'm a little bit like tired of Samsung software, yada yada. And Gabriel was just like giving me all this great advice and really enthusiastically. I mean, I want to say like defending Samsung, but like, I mean, really, he was just really enthusiastic and knowledgeable. And I was like, okay, we have to get Gabriel on the show. So I was kind of curious, Gabriel, like, if you're a small phone person, like, how do you feel about large screens? How do you feel about the push to large screens? And as like a small phone person, where do you either see large screens not fitting into your life or possibly fitting into your life for your personal use case? Or I don't know, what's your perspective on like large screens for both personally and like kind of like more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, smartphones are such a personally and deeply integrated part of everyone's life. You spend literally hours on it. You can check your screen on time every day and see just how much time we spend on these things. And so people build up these habits of how they use them and how they want to use them and what it means to them. What pocket do you put it in? What purse do you put it in? What table do you put it on? How do you hold it, etc. So for me, like so as Win was saying, I have a Z Fold 3, and I just personally I cannot use it. I was really excited about it. I was like, I'm gonna give it a shot. This is like the nicest, by price at least, phone that money can buy, and an incredible piece of technology, very impressive. And the second I held it, I was like, this phone makes no sense. When it's closed, it's so narrow. You can barely type on it. Yeah. Your thumbs like right up against each other. Like take an iPhone mini and then shrink that in terms of width. And then it's super tall. So then if you want to get the status bar, you then need a second hand just to go all the way up and drag it down. You want to open an email or a text message or something like that, and you can see like 2 or 3 words, and then you open it up, and then you can't type because your hands are like this. They're separated, and Samsung has this split view keyboard, which is somewhat handy, where you can take the 2 sides of the keyboard and pull them to the edge, and so you can do 2-thumb typing without reaching all the way to the middle of the screen. But none of the other keyboards support that. And Samsung keyboard and their autocorrect is not as good as Gboard and SwiftKey. So it felt like I just couldn't figure out like when do I keep it closed, when do I keep it open. The battery life is way worse when it's open. All the reviewers said the crease was like kind of not that noticeable. I found it just glaring. You can feel it, you can see it. It reflects light. The form factor made no sense. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, maybe all the changes coming to Android 12L will make more sense.
We'll fix that, right?
Different people have different patterns, but like for that, they'll make maybe app switching quicker or multi-window faster. I like multi-window on a phone I would rather switch between full screen apps more quickly than I actually I can show you. I have a bit of a unique setup with my phone. I use a widget called App Dialer, and it's a T9 widget. For those of you who can see it,
cool.
You can see it up right now.
That's cool.
And for those of you who can't see, it literally looks like an old school T9 keyboard. You tap the letters and numbers of either the app or the contact that you want. And so with 2 or 3 of these taps, I can launch any app really, really easily.
Jason, that reminds me of the back in the day, the arena when Gabriel, I was always on the hunt for like weird launcher UI apps that like changed the paradigm of how you use the phone. You know, like remember there was like a whole bunch of where like it puts a wheel on the screen and you can spin around and find the apps and stuff like that. That's right up that same alley. That's so funny. That's so cool. I like it. Yeah,
exactly. And I think another thing that people who either are Pixel people or Samsung people maybe not realize is even the one-handed modes are very different. Google finally added it to the Pixel 6 or Android 12, I should say. And they took the iPhone version where it takes the top half of the screen and slides it down. But on Samsung, and they've had this for years, you slide down on the home button and it just shrinks the screen. And so you can use the whole screen with one hand, and you can move it from one side to the other, and you can change the size of that small one-handed preview. And to me, it feels much more logical. If you're brushing your teeth, you can use it with one hand. It's a much more intuitive and easy to use one-handed mode than I think what Google did.
And you're not limited to a portion of the screen. I mean, that's exactly an example of I would say anyone who is a fan of Samsung, God, you almost have to be, at least to a certain degree, a fan of the software stuff that they do, because so much of the Samsung experience is all of these extra features that Samsung has created. Some people, all those features can be an annoyance. It's kind of like, get out of the way. I just want my basic, experience. But for other people, I have to imagine, that Samsung experience, that's one of the key selling points.
Well, what's so funny about that, Jason, is that I will say, like, coming off of the Unpacked event and the launch last week, like, I feel like this one landed much better than previous phones or events in terms of the number of people outside our Android sphere of influence that I'm used to, like case in point this weekend. So everyone knows I've got my sister on Android, and currently right now, I think she's on the Pixel. I think she's still on the Pixel 3, to be honest. I think she's totally due. I'm waiting for the 6A to get her on it. But my brother-in-law texted and said, "Hey, is the Samsung Galaxy S22 any good? Should I get it for your sister?" And so he's an iOS user. Right. Clearly, he saw the commercials and the press and stuff like that, and thought like maybe this is her next phone. And I actually said, no, I wouldn't get it for her because she's been on the Pixel for so many generations that I feel like the Samsung UI would be jarring, and like it would be such a kind of whiplash in terms of how she uses the phone. I said, we're thinking the Pixel 6A will be this spring. Hang out, and I'll keep you posted when it comes out, and we'll get her that phone. I go, unless you want to get the Pixel 6. I couldn't recommend the Pixel 5A with 5G. I don't know why. Just something in me was like, just wait for the 6A. But,
this close, it's hard to do that.
Yeah. But that's the thing, is that the same. But conversely, if it was someone Gabriel like yourself, who is a Samsung loyalist, who's been using Samsung phones for years, this clearly you're on that track, right? And so I just think I think that the line is so drastic for regular users that it is hard to jump.
Yeah, I completely agree. And when I see other random people who are not so much in the tech sphere using like Samsung phones, I almost feel a little bit bad, because I feel like in order to get the best Samsung experience, you almost have to de-Samsungify it a little bit. You have to go in like, I'll change the keyboard. There's all these awkward things. It's gonna have Samsung Internet and Chrome, and there were
sort my apps alphabetically instead of whatever weird sorting they choose to do. It's always weird out of the box.
There's all these funky things. You have to go in, and you have to be one of those people who likes at least going through all the settings one time to make it feel right, because out of the box, they're still not at that level, and I would not recommend it for someone just to, like an iPhone or a Pixel phone are at the point where you could just give it to someone and say go. Samsung's not there, and I wouldn't recommend it for someone who's not willing to put in a little bit of effort to make it there. But if you put in that effort, I think it's the best Android experience out there right now.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. Google Messages will be the default messaging app on these new Samsung devices. So, more and more we're seeing that. And that being the case on Samsung devices, I feel like is, kind of a bigger deal than most other manufacturers. We haven't even talked about the Tab family, the Tab S8, the S8 Plus, and the S8 Ultra. The Ultra coming in at a cool $1,100 for an Android tablet. But I'm sure it's a fantastic tablet. I spent a good amount of time with the Tab S7, and I was blown away by it. Like, they're built so well. The design of these tablets is amazing. It's just, do you feel comfortable spending $1,100, to get in the door for an S8 Ultra, an Android tablet? And that ends up being kind of the larger question of, is the OS going to support tablets on a deeper level? Google has that plan with Android 12L. Are developers going to then also kind of come on over and do the work that they need to do to make that experience better, to make an $1,100 tablet sing, compared to what you can get with an iPad already? That's always the comparison. So are you optimistic that could happen, or has Android has the train left the station for Android? What do you think, Gabriel?
Oh, I think you really hit on a very specific point that I know that Win was also thinking when you said, are developers going to support it with their apps? I was like, I wonder what Win is thinking right now. We've run in some similar circles where we've talked at length about whether we should or shouldn't build our apps, Trello, Airbnb, etc., for tablets. Tablets had their moment around Android tablets had their moment in around 2015 in the Nexus 7 era. And the iPad was relatively new back then, and everyone was making all their apps for both mobile and tablet. And since then, there's been a major divergence in the tablet world where iPads have continued to get more popular and Android tablets have been all but abandoned, frankly. Google stopped making Pixel or Nexus tablets, and most Android apps have completely abandoned. Even if they had them, they've abandoned their tablet version of the app. And it's very much this catch-22 game where they're not going to come back until there are people using them. And I'm skeptical that something like a Tab S8 is going to really make a dent enough to get people convinced to put in all the work. It's a huge tax on companies to have to design their screens twice, once for mobile and once for tablet, and then they have to build them twice and test them twice. It's very, very expensive for companies to support that. And I would love to see the ecosystem come back alive. And I just have a hard time seeing what is going to be the killer app or the killer device when all of these new updates seem so incremental.
Yeah. Really, I
gotta say
good point.
There's some harsh words about tablets there, Gabriel. I don't know. I mean, I'm holding a flame for Android tablets because I love. I mean, hey, I missed the show for the past 2 weeks because I was on the road and I bought my tablet and I watched The Expanse on Amazon. I read books. I read comics. I used email. Like, it was like I was on planes and I was like, I've got this ridiculously enormous Mac laptop that I don't want to take out of my backpack on the plane because I can't fit it on the tray. And so I deferred to my Lenovo tablet and I used it pretty nicely on that trip. I think it's possible, but you're right. It's a catch-22 where you need to have the user adoption. And so you need to have developer support, and then you need to have manufacturer justify it. And it's just like, it's this, cycle that we just can't, is flywheel that we just can't get moving. Right. And so,
yeah. But to your point, when you think about it, like from the perspective of someone who might want to buy one of these things, thinking about what are you going to use on it? You can use Chrome, and you're going to use a bunch of media apps and maybe some like note-taking apps or something like that. Like, those are slam dunk use cases for tablets, and those still exist in that world. And it's just the long tail of apps. Like, are all of the apps used on your phone going to have a tablet version? Probably not. Especially not one that supports the 14-inch, whatever is the large version of that Tab S8. But for these really core use cases, books, media, web browsing, note-taking, the basics are there, and so that might be enough for people to at least get started.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about what you said, Gabriel, about the Fold, and that you were kind of confused about what is this for? And I think that as much that is kind of like the other piece of the problem is that, okay, the devices are expensive. Okay, devs are kind of having a hard time like justifying and spending resources on supporting it. But then it's also just like, what is the killer use case that is going to make this a thing? And is it like the use case not fitting the form factor with the case of the Fold? Is it just finding like different like niches for like different form factors between like the Folds and then like the S tab, the Ultras, and the other kind of like S Folds, or like the other kind of variants of like this like large screen like device. I don't know. I feel like that's it too. Like, what's the good use case for this? What is the killer thing? And I think that's what we ask ourselves is like, what features are going to make people really want to use a large screen? Like, and not just, it's not all about just scaling your UI up. It's about finding these compelling use cases that maybe people just don't realize because we're just, as we talked about, just we're so used to smartphones now. And there's so many things that we're now accustomed to doing on our smartphone that now it's almost like we've kind of shrunk a lot of our lives to fit on a smartphone. Now we're kind of going into reverse and trying to see how we can expand things out again to work with large screens. And it's like dragging people away from their smartphones to the large screens will be an interesting problem to solve. I'm welcoming because I find the phone to be terribly inefficient as a productivity device. You know what I mean? Like I've talked about it on the show in the past, but and Gabriel, you brought a great point. Like the majority of my device usage is media consumption and some sort of communication and some sort of productivity and that sort of thing. And I use email on my phone as triage. I see emails come in, and if there's one I need to respond to, I go to a keyboard to respond to it. And call me old-fashioned. I mean, I'm old, learners. I'm ancient, right? I know many people in the chat room will point that out to me all the time. But like, I am loath to write more than a paragraph of an email on my phone because just between the errors on the keyboard and all that sort of stuff. And when it comes to like working on a document or something like that, I have nothing but pain in like getting a document in Slack and downloading it to my phone and opening it and having the right viewer or the right app and looking at it and zooming in at the deck and stuff like that. It's just not feasible. Like I need a larger space to do it. And laptop ultimately is the one that we're the most used to for the past 20 plus years, but like tablet would be a little more flexible and I'm open to that. But yeah, it's fascinating to see how we need to evolve somehow. And I don't know how we're going to get over this hump, but I feel like the next generation of these devices is going to be, when to your point, moving away from the phones to bigger screens. And so,
and it's going to come down to like ergonomics and what is the actual experience of using it. And a phone I know you've covered on the show in the past is the Oppo Find N. And being in the United States, haven't had the chance to use one. But to me, that it feels like this is one of the first foldables where they've really tried to strike a balance of ergonomics, where that size is going to work while it's closed, and it's going to be significantly enhanced for things like media consumption when it's open. So with something like the Z Fold, it may not be inherent to the form factor. I think that the dimensions, both when it's closed and when it's open, don't make sense for me personally. But I think that as they iterate and again move and experiment with wider and shorter and taller and narrower and thicker and all these different sizes, there could be some really interesting developments along the way.
I will say before we move on from the Samsung S22, now that it's official and it's out there in the world, I will say I do feel bad for all the people with that fear of holes thing, that tryptophobia or whatever it is, like the cluster of holes. Because like I was watching the Olympics and I saw one of the ads and I was like, oh man, I don't even have this and I'm uncomfortable with all those holes in the back of the phone. So yeah.
Oh no.
I always need to call that out. It is an unsettling trend in phones. That's why I like my Pixel 6 with it's all hidden in that bar. Like you can't.
Yes, it's hidden in a bar. Yeah, and on the Ultra, it's like half of the back of that phone is holes.
Oh, it's a cluster. Yeah, I mean, I know someone who does suffer or deal with the anxiety of that, and is just like it mentioned the phone like shudders and goes, oh, I can't even look at it. So it's like it's a real thing. Yep.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, wild. I wonder, there must be people out there who are also afraid of not having signal. And I would think one of the specs that, sorry, that's a terrible joke. Whatever. One of the specs that I haven't seen covered quite as much is this new 5G radio in the S22. I think it's the Qualcomm X65, something like that. And PC Magazine did some benchmarks this week, and it is dramatically better with low signal strength. And where the S21 and all the older phones were dropping off much earlier, the S22 was able to completely blow by every single other phone in the market. And with this new X65 5G chip. So I imagine they're the first one to launch with this chip, and the 2022 smartphones will probably all have it. But it wasn't really talked about too much, but I think it's something that will make a big difference. And I actually wonder, going back to the battery life thing, if because the phone will not be in this low signal state as often, if that might actually make a big difference in battery life.
Yeah. And before we transition out of Samsung and go into email, I just want to real quickly mention, because this was kind of a big deal in the update kind of realm of Android, devices. Samsung has raised their commitment to 4 years of major OS updates, and I think 5 years of security updates. So, and of all the manufacturers that I've spent a lot of time with, I would say, especially the Ultras and the Notes and everything like that, those really the premium top of the line Samsung devices, I could totally see holding onto those devices for 5 years. And now that Samsung is making more of a commitment to bring even more OS updates, they basically out Google's promise, and that's notable, right? Samsung's the right company to be able to do that. They have the resources, of course, to make that happen, whereas other manufacturers would have a hard time committing to that. But still, I was very happy to see that for their latest devices, that promise. So, all right. Well, coming up next, we've got a bunch of your emails. AAA at twit.tv, 347-SHOW AAA. That's how you can get in touch with us. And we have a few of you who did. We have more, actually, than we are able to feature in today's show. But we picked 3 of them. And so here we go. Sean wrote in to say, I wanted to thank you, in particular Ron, for confirming that you can open Google Keep on a Nest Hub Max. I was able to purchase the Nest Hub Max yesterday for $40 off, which was great. I've started moving my recipes over to Google Keep, and I've come across a few things I thought I would share with you. This was a topic a few weeks ago. At this point, this is probably 3 or 4 weeks ago.
And
Ron,
I will say one of the things I'm most proud of is the fact that he had a question, and I was able to research it and provide an answer. And I love closing the loop on the feedback with a thank you. You're welcome, Sean. I'm glad I helped you. So,
yeah, and not only that, a thank you, and oh, by the way, here's what it's like in action. Here's some tips. Yeah. So it says, first, the title of the note doesn't actually display when you ask Google to show you your notes. It's the first line of the note that displays. So each of my notes has the same information in the title and the first line of the note, which that makes sense. You would title it banana bread recipe, and then the first line of your recipe, actual recipe, would say banana bread recipe. That way, when it shows up on the screen, it actually has that title. So it's kind of, unfortunately, you have to do that.
Looks weird in Keep, but will work in the UI that you want it to. So
yeah, totally. Makes it work. Kind of bummer that you have to do that, but anyways. Second point, I had to put an extra blank line in the bottom of the recipe. Otherwise, the edit and delete icons on the note would block some of the text. So there you go. I didn't put the screenshot in on that, unfortunately. So you'll have to take my word for it. Sean says, the only issue I need to figure out is when I tell Google to open my notes and then I open a recipe, and the note only stays open for a minute before the screen changes to the Google Nest home screen. So I need to figure out if there's a way to have Google Keep stay open for more than a minute. Hopefully I can figure out a workaround for this. And as that is the only real issue I have.
I feel like there should be, because I've dealt with this on the video side of things, because as you know, I don't want my kids watching TV on the Google Nest Home. So when I pull up a song that is a stupid video in YouTube Music, I swipe right to go back to the clock to cover up the video. I feel like, you'd be surprised. There's a lot more hidden under that Nest Hub home screen. Just by swiping left and right and up and down, you can get to different controls and things like that. So I'm wondering if, after seeing it for a minute and it goes back to the home screen, if you swipe back to the app, you can get back to it. That might be, I'm sure you've explored this, but that might be something as well. So,
something to take a look at. But anyways, there you go.
I just want to share everybody in our behind the scenes chat with Burke. Burke just wrote in all caps, it's like Google has never used the Post-it note. So I think Burke is very insightful. So
true.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for writing in with that, Sean. We appreciate it. Wen, you've got the next one.
All right. Well, Brian M. wrote in saying, I just wanted to voice an opinion from a Pixel user with an older, perfectly fine phone. I realize your job is to showcase the latest and greatest, but many of us keep our phones until they wear out. I have a Pixel 3 and my wife has a Pixel 2. Both work perfectly fine. I talked my son into a 4A and he loves it. I'm not going to spend $1,000 on a phone. Just wanted to give voice to our silent majority. And I mean, like, it's actually a really good point. I don't know. Like, I wonder if we can get some stats on that, on like kind of like the average, like, lifespan of an average user's phone. But I think that, Brian, I'm like, all power to you. And I think that with the trends that we're seeing, like we just talked about, Samsung extending support for 4 years for its phones. And obviously, like, it's kind of across the board, just like people trying to support phones for longer makes a lot of sense. And like, again, as we said before, Android's kind of supposed to be the platform for a lot of different folks, not just folks that can afford to pay like $1,000 on a phone every year. So absolutely power to you if you can make those phones work as long as they can. But
I mean, going back to my example of my sister, like she's on a Pixel 3 and aside from hating Android 12, which was very amusing when it happened. But dealing with the battery life issue, like her battery just, she's at the point now of managing it throughout the day. It's working fine for her, and so and it's funny because going back to the conversation with my brother-in-law, I actually considered maybe looking for a Pixel 4a because I felt like that would be a good option for her, but I am going to wait for the 6a. But it's not everybody wants to change their phone every year. So
Well, this is going to get more and more common too. Like personally, I'm on the S20 and looking forward to the S22. There's effectively nothing that's materially different, even for like a techie person. And so I would go as far as to say, I don't know, today you may be somewhere between a majority, minority, but at the very least, you're almost definitely an early majority because if we may not be here today, but a few years from now, I think most people are going to be keeping their phones for 3, 4, 5+ years.
And especially as the companies more and more devote themselves to longer update cycles, that can only help. Because then you're not relying on your device that's 3 years since its last update still operating quickly enough. I would guess that if a company is taking the time to update to the next version, they're taking the time to really configure the device or that version of Android to run efficiently on the device. At least we're hoping that anyways, to keep the performance up. But I don't know. That's purely a guess. I don't know what a Samsung Galaxy S22 is going to be like 5 years from now. But I'll be curious to see, like, is it markedly slower? Does the battery degrade over that time and make it, just like you're charging throughout the day more and more as a result? I don't know what that's going to look like, but. Yeah,
but certainly you can get your battery swapped or your screen swapped, and it's not like the second it stops getting updates, you throw the thing in the trash can. You could be running a phone with an Oreo or Pie or whatever, and Marshmallow even, and it would be just fine today. And especially now, looking forward, a phone you get today is going to have Android 12, 13, 14, and all the way through to 2030 probably. Android 14 is going to be just fine.
Yeah, you're right.
I will say that the phone that I put Android 13 on is my Pixel 3, and I kind of will totally cop to trying to buy the new Pixel every year is more of a bad habit, more of a kind of like developer indulgence on my part. Once I put Android 13 on this, it ran perfectly fine. This is one that I actually didn't break or anything. It's actually small. Like, look at this. Look at the sizes of these phones. I forgot how nice it is to have a phone that actually fits in my hand. So. Yes, I definitely do question my life choices at getting a new Pixel phone every year. I guess the only thing that would be a kind of deal breaker on this is, of course, the security updates, which are going to be stopping soon. But definitely still a very viable phone and perfectly fine to test out Android 13 on. So
yeah, no question. That's what those older phones are probably perfect for. For a number of reasons, I would imagine. Cool stuff. Thank you, Brian.
All right. And to round us out, I'm very honored to return back to the show after being gone for 2 weeks with the honor of sharing with you the email of the week. Right on cue. It's like, oh, sweet, sweet music. Thank you, Burke, for that email of the week fanfare. And here you go.
I didn't know if that was going to happen.
Me too. I thought I caught him off guard. So congratulations to David Wilmore, who writes in and says, I'm a bit lagged as I just listened to All About Android 562, where Ron was talking about some of his old phones that he recently rediscovered. There were a few with rubberized plastic, which had turned sticky. There's an easy fix for that. Just take a rag, wet it with some rubbing alcohol, and wipe the plastic. It will remove the tacky feeling and restore the device feel to new. Some plastics may change texture a little bit when you do this, so beware. I hope this helps him restore his old friends. And thank you, David. I'm going to take your advice this weekend, and I'm going to de-tacky my Nexus 5, and I'm going to put it in a little shadow box frame and hang it on the wall. So thank you. I wonder if I could rig... this is like if I was much more crafty and did more things on YouTube and things like that. You get a little shadow box with a charger plugged into the phone that you can plug into the wall. So to keep the device on in the box and always running some sort of thing.
That would be cool. I love that.
Someone much cooler that goes to Maker Faire than I could put that together and sell it. So there's an idea.
Sure.
Just give me one when you do it. But in the meantime, thanks for that advice, David. Everybody take heed. If you have rubberized plastic that's been sitting in a box for 5 years, you can de-tacky it with rubbing alcohol, but beware, it might change the texture. And congratulations on your, as far as I know, first email of the week.
Even Burke has confirmed in our Slack, this works in all caps. So he basically yelled that to us. He said, this works.
I don't think that there's any difference between Burke. It's always yelling. It's just always yelling.
Burke is all caps all the time. Right on. All right. Well, we have reached the end of this episode of All About Android. It's been awesome having you on for the first time. Gabriel Peal, you got to come back, Gabriel. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. This was fun. I could talk about Android all day. So
right on.
This is where we do it. So yeah. So please come back.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is your opportunity to plug anything you have going on. I know you mentioned that you were hiring. If you want to throw out details on that, go for it. Or really anything. It's totally up to you. What you got?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always doing fun Android stuff for the last many years. If you're interested at all at Tonal, where it's one of the only companies where our core product is Android. Everyone is looking at our Android thing, and Android is at the center of everything we do. But it's also pretty cool. We're in the fitness space, connected fitness.
It's awesome.
And it's a lot of fun. It's a really, really awesome team. We're looking to grow the team both on the engineering side, but really across the company. So even if you're not an engineer, don't worry about it. We have a careers page, tonal.com/careers. You can check that out. I'm always available on Twitter, gpeel8. Feel free to hit me up there. If you want to talk about Android, you want to talk about Tonal, you want to talk about Lottie, or anything else, I'm always around. So you know how to get in touch with me. But this has been fun. I really, really enjoyed it. So if you made it this far, thanks for listening. Nice. Thank you, Gabriel. It's our pleasure, and I'll definitely be in touch. We'll have you back again. Really appreciate your time. Thank you. What do you got going on? What do you want people to know?
Oh, actually, I'm giving a talk on Android Jetpack Compose animations on Thursday. It's actually for a kind of an Android meetup in Vietnam, so it's going to be super early in the morning for me. But if they have a recording, I'll try to get it up. But get it up kind of like on a link or something where people can watch. But yeah, that's kind of what I do. I talk about Android stuff very often. So you can find me at Queen Code Monkey on Instagram and Twitter, and also on my website, randomlytyping.com.
Right on. Looking forward to that. I hope there's a replay for it. That sounds great. Sounds fun. Thank you, Wen. Always a pleasure.
Of course. Yeah.
And Ron, what about you?
You can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at RonXO. And you can go check out scorebit.io on the web, or download the Scorebit app in the Google Play Store. If you're into pinball, you can keep track of your scores and all that fun stuff. We were recently, the reason why I missed the show was I was at Indisc in Riverside, California, where there's a big pinball tournament happening, and we had Scorebit devices installed in over 20 of the tournament machines and had awesome stuff going on there. It was really great to be there, a lot of fun. We're working on a new version of the app. In fact, Gabriel, I was laughing at your React Native Airbnb Medium post in our show notes. We didn't get to talk about that, but we've been wrestling with React Native on our app and trying to get this latest release out the door. So I definitely feel the pain, but it's going to be out soon. It'll be pretty cool, and I'll talk about it when it is out. So stay tuned.
Right on. Good to have you back, Ron. Big thanks to Victor behind the scenes for turning the show around, making it happen, making it hit your feeds and be edited and all that. It's also big thanks to Burke for yelling at us in Slack, but also pushing buttons and occasionally doing a news bumper on this show. And applauding himself, apparently. See, he's got that power. He has the ability to do that. So if I had that ability, I'd do it too. You can find me on Twitter at Jason Howell. Also here on the Twit Network, just doing shows. Tech News Weekly with Micah Sargent. Is just an awesome interview show. We interview people and it's a lot of fun. Learn a lot each and every week. So check that out. twit.tv/TNW. Don't forget, Club Twit is a thing that we offer here. If you don't like ads in your podcasts, you're going to remove them. It's an ad-free subscription tier that we call Club Twit, and it's just a whole lot of fun. Not only do you get shows with no ads, you also get access to our exclusive Twit Plus podcast feed with tons of exclusive extra content. Actually, there's going to be an AMA with Odocta, Owen J.J. Stone, this Friday, I believe. Ant Pruitt is the community manager, and he's kicking butt with bringing in some awesome exclusive content for Club Twit. And you get access to our members only Discord channel, $7 a month, twit.tv/Club Twit, and you can check it out for yourself. But that is it for this week's episode. Don't forget, you can go to twit.tv/AAA. That's our show page on the web where you can find all the ways to subscribe in audio and video formats. Everything you need to know is right there, and we publish the show every Tuesday evening. So, if you're subscribed, you don't have to think about it. On Wednesday morning, it'll already be on your device ready to play. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you next time on All About Android. Bye, everybody.
Did you spend a lot of money on your brand new smartphone and then you look at the pictures on Facebook and Instagram and you're like, what in the world happened to that photo? Yes, you have. I know. It happens to all of us. Well, you need to check out my show, Hands On Photography, where I'm going to walk you through simple tips and tricks that are going to help make you get the most out of your smartphone camera or your DSLR or mirrorless, whatever you have, and those shots are going to look so much better. I promise you. So make sure you're tuning in to twit.tv/hop for Hands On Photography to find out more.